For 16 local, the ocean looks empty, but the screens do not. A thin green line jumps, steadies, and refuses to vanish. In the carrier's combat center, the air smells like coffee and hot electronics. Somewhere above the clouds, something notices the wake. The first sound is not an alarm, but a breath held too long. Officers lean closer, as if distance changes the truth. A junior radar tech whispers a number that makes no sense, yet out there, steel and lives move in a pattern that can be solved. The invitation is simple, and it tastes like metal. If the sea stops being hiding, where does a fleet go? The ship is not lost. Not yet. But it is no longer invisible. In that instant, the old ocean ends, and a hunted ocean begins. A carrier strike group is a city with discipline and a schedule. It wakes, jets, feeds mouths, spins, turbines, and speaks in encrypted bursts. It believes in distance, layers, and time to react. China's plan is to steal time. The trap is not a single missile. It is a clock built from sensors, algorithms, and doctrine. It turns the Pacific into a spreadsheet with moving cells. It turns somewhere out there into a grid square with a countdown. The strike group runs quiet, but quiet is never absolute. Heat leaks from engines like guilt. A helicopter's rotor beats air into a signature. Even the sea itself tattles, carving a wake that lingers behind the hull. Above, a radar satellite paints the surface with microwave pulses. It does not photograph, it measures, and measurement is cruel. Clouds become irrelevant. Darkness becomes irrelevant. Politics becomes irrelevant. The return is a bright smear where nothing should be bright. Onshore, a second system watches wider and uglier. High-frequency waves bounce off the ionosphere and crawl beyond the horizon. The picture is not sharp, but it is persistent. It sees motion, and motion is enough to begin a hunt. A third stream listens for the fleet's nervous habits. Tiny emissions from navigation radars, data links, and routine chatter. A carrier can go dark, but escorts breathe in bursts. The ocean is quiet, yet the spectrum is never silent. These feeds converge in a room that feels like an air-conditioned bunker and a trading floor. Analysts do not shout, they annotate. A track is born, then strengthened, then blessed as real. The moment it becomes real, it becomes lethal. Out at sea, the carrier's captain hears a calm report that carries panic inside it. The words are procedural, but the eyes are not. The strike group changes course by a few degrees, like a rabbit fainting. The ocean does not care about feints when it is being measured from space. The group's doctrine assumes warning, then reaction, then interception. It assumes minutes become decisions, and decisions become survival. China's doctrine assumes something else entirely. It assumes the first useful warning is the impact report. The phrase 12 minutes is not poetry, it is geometry. A medium-range ballistic missile does not cross oceans, it crosses distance. In 12 minutes, a carrier can move, but it cannot leave the equation. In 12 minutes, a war becomes a math problem with no mercy. The trigger is a political flash that lasts 4 minutes on a secure line. A crisis in the first island chain hardens into certainty. Leaders speak of deterrence, but the targeting center speaks of windows. The order arrives like a stamp on a form. Launch crews move with rehearsed boredom because fear wastes motion. Hatches open, hydraulic systems hiss, and metal remembers its purpose. The missile rises on a pillar of fire that turns night into a brief sunrise. Cameras catch it, but the missile is already gone. In the carrier's combat center, the first detection looks like a glitch. A track climbs fast, too fast. and the computers classify it with cold confidence. They display labels it in 3 letters that shrink the room. Everyone hears the same sentence in their head. It is defensive systems respond before the human mind finishes believing. Fire control solutions bloom like digital flowers. Interceptors are assigned, reassigned, and timed down 2 seconds. A destroyer's crew feels the ship vibrate as missiles leave their cells. The first intercept attempt is a clean, expensive hope. A kinetic vehicle climbs to meet the warhead, where air becomes thin. The closing speed is obscene, a collision planned by equations and faith. One missed correction becomes a miss that cannot be argued away. China's kill chain does not freeze. When the intercept launches, it watches the interceptors plume from orbit and updates the calculus. New data slides into the warhead's brain through a data link window. The trap tightens because it can learn mid-flight. The carrier's escorts flood the air with electronic noise. Jammers push power into the sky and try to smear the truth. Decoys enter the water, creating false returns and fake wakes. The ocean becomes a stage full of actors, and the sensors pick the one that weighs 90,000 tons. In the targeting center, nobody celebrates. They simply watch the probability curve lift. The curve is not certainty, but it is enough to continue. A second missile is not needed if the first one still has a path. The trap is designed to keep moving, even when hitchy. The warhead reaches the upper atmosphere, and the world changes texture. Air stops being air and becomes plasma under violence. Heat builds at the leading edge, and radio waves begin to die. For a short span, the warhead enters a blackout that feels like blindness. Blackout does not mean safety. It means the last updates are aging like milk. It means their warhead falls on stored truth and prediction. It means the terminal seeker must wake up and see a ship it has never touched. On the escorting destroyer, the crew counts seconds in their bones. The radar track degrades, then strengthens, then flickers again. Officers speak in clipped phrases, because longer sentences feel like surrender. Somewhere below, sailors grip rails and pretend it helps. A terminal interceptor launches, smaller, faster, and more desperate. Its guidance depends on track quality and luck. The geometry window shrinks until it is almost a slit. The interceptor races upward, and the warhead races downward, and physics chooses. Even a fragment is a weapon at hypersonic speed. If the intercept shatters the warhead, the debris still arrives with hateful energy. Shards fall like a shotgun blast from the sky. Metal that was once guidance becomes shrapnel with intent. The carrier's flight deck crew never sees the incoming object as a shape. They see a warning light and feel the air change. A deep thump reaches them through steel, like a giant knocking once. Then the world tilts into violence. The impact does not need a giant explosive to be catastrophic. Kinetic energy turns structure into dust and heat. Steel plate buckles, ruptures, and peels back. The deck becomes a wound that smokes and breathes flame. Below, compartments filled with soot and screaming alarms. Firefighting teams move toward the glow with hoses and respirators. They have trained for this in sterile drills. Now the heat is real, and the smoke tastes like burned insulation and fuel. Aircraft on deck become liabilities in an instant. Fuel lines rupture, ordnance cooks off, and the deck turns into a minefield. A parked jet's tires burst with gunshot pops. The carrier is still afloat, but it is no longer an airfield. The strike group's radios fill with clipped damage reports. Words like contained and under control appear early because hope is a tool. Then the truth pushes through. Catapult systems are down. Arresting gear is compromised. Deck operations are impossible. The mission is bleeding out. In the first hour, the public knows almost nothing. A vague statement leaks, then vanishes behind official silence. Financial markets smell the blood anyway and begin to convulse. Insurance algorithms reprice the ocean in milliseconds. In coastal cities across the Pacific, the information gap becomes its own panic. Rumors claim a carrier is sinking, then claim a carrier has been nuked. People refresh screens until screens lag and networks choke. Clarity becomes a luxury item that nobody can buy. Governments react in rooms the public never sees. Secure video conferences flicker with stern faces and tired eyes. The word Article 5 appears, then disappears, then returns like a threat. Nobody wants a wider war, but nobody wants weakness more. China's next move is quieter than fire, but it spreads farther. Cyber teams push malicious updates into maritime logistics systems. Ports see, cranes freeze midair, like paused insects. Customs databases corrupt, and container tracking becomes guesswork. On Guam, backup generators cough as the grid stutters. Fuel deliveries are delayed by confusion and threat warnings. Hospitals switch to ration mode without calling it rationing. The island's normal hum becomes a thin, anxious buzz. Undersea cables do not cut cleanly on camera, but they can be bruised. Signal quality degrades in pockets, then worsens. The Pacific feels larger as latency grows and calls drop. Distance becomes a weapon again, used against the connected world. The U.S. Navy does what it always does under pressure. It disperses. It hardens. It lies to itself less. Submarines slip into deeper water like secrets. Surface ships spread out because clustering is an invitation now. But dispersal has a cost in the human mind. Sailors know the carrier is their heart. Without it, the ocean feels colder and more predatory. The horizon looks the same, yet it no longer promises help. China's sensor web keeps watching, because watching is cheaper than shooting. Small drones patrol sea lanes, dipping sensors into water. Fishing vessels move in patterns that are too neat to be innocent. Civilian clutter becomes camouflage, and camouflage becomes a strategy. The next 12-minute trap is not aimed at a carrier. It is aimed at confidence itself. Every commander now asks if their position is already solved. Every radar contact feels like a question with teeth. The war expands without needing more explosions. Back in Washington, the language of limited begins to rot. Advisors argue for proportionality, then argue for speed. The problem is not capability, it is time. The trap has stolen time, and stolen time makes leaders clumsy. In Beijing, silence is part of the message. No triumphant broadcast, no parade announcement, only measured statements about sovereignty. The restraint is calculated because panic is contagious. The world fills the silence with its own terror. Allies in the region begin to shift into wartime posture without calling it war. Fuel depots are guarded, runways are cleared, and reservists receive quiet texts. Cities practice blackouts in daylight. Everyone pretends. It is routine. Civilians feel the breakdown in small humiliations first. ATMs show errors, not because cash is gone, but because networks are strained. Gas stations limit purchases temporarily, which is a lie. Everyone understands. Stores restock slower, and people move faster. The supermarket shelves do not empty from scarcity alone. They empty from anticipation, and anticipation is a stampede. A mother fills a cart with rice and batteries and apologizes to nobody. Fear becomes a currency with no exchange rate. In neighborhoods near bases, the sky changes character. More aircraft pass, lower and louder. Sirens test, then test again, and nobody laughs the third time. Children learn the sound of readiness the way they once learned ice cream trucks. Far out, the damaged carrier limps under escort. Smoke faint but persistent. Fire crews still fight hidden hotspots like stubborn embers in a forest. The ship's reactors stay protected. The hull stays buoyant. The flag stays raised. Survival is not victory, but it is not nothing. A carrier's true value is not steel, but rhythm. It launches sorties, recovers them, repairs them, and repeats until the enemy breaks. When that rhythm stops, strategy loses its heartbeat. A mission kill is a kind of decapitation that leaves the body walking. China's anti-access zone is validated in the language that matters most. Planners see the radius, the timelines, the sensor overlaps. They see that the first island chain can become a wall. They see that a wall does not need to be perfect, only credible. The U.S. response begins to change shape in real time. Smaller ships matter more, and unmanned platforms become less experimental. Long-range bombers rotate forward because distance is suddenly safer than presence. Distributed lethality stops being a phrase and starts being a diet. None of this comes the public, because the public feels the fog. Information arrives in confident tones, then gets corrected, then disappears. Every correction feels like betrayal, even when it is honest. People begin to trust rumors, because rumors at least admit uncertainty. In the new normal, preparation becomes a quiet social divider. Some households have radios, water, and planned routes. Others have streaming subscriptions and faith. The gap between them is not money alone, but imagination. The invisible threat is not only missiles, it is the possibility of escalation, hovering like radiation you cannot smell. Leaders speak of red lines, but lines blur when systems fail. A misread launch could become a cascade nobody can stop. Military bases adopted new etiquette of suspicion. Vehicles are inspected longer. IDs are checked harder. Flights are delayed for security sweeps that never end. The constant vigilance erodes sleep, and sleep loss erodes judgment. Across the Pacific, rationing appears wearing softer words. Fuel prioritization, supply stabilization, consumption guidance. People comply for a week, then comply less. The social contract stretches until it creaks, because stress finds every weak seam. In closed rooms, strategists admit what sailors already feel. The carrier is not obsolete, but it is no longer sacred. The ocean is still wide, but it is now indexed. The hunt can begin at any time, and that changes everything. Months later, the carrier returns to a dock under heavy security. Welders cut away ruined deck sections, like surgeons removing dead tissue. Investigators walk the scar and photograph the truth. Every bolt becomes a lesson written in steel. The geopolitical aftermath does not end with a treaty and applause. It settles into budgets, deployments, and hardened assumptions. Nations invest in missiles because missiles are cheaper than symbols. Trust becomes a strategic resource that everyone hoards. The lingering truth is simple, and it tastes like ash. Modern safety is an illusion held together by electricity, satellites, and shared restraint. When restraint fractures, the world becomes a set of countdowns. The 12-minute trap is not a weapon. It is a future that is already arriving.